How's it going out there? My name is Scott Garriott, and I'm going to show you some of the records I've gotten in the past couple months. Let's see. All right. So this is David Bowie Tonight. This is one that I have not listened to yet, but I kind of started obsessively collecting David Bowie stuff after he died, whenever that was, a year or two ago. And I got all of his 70s albums, including that David Live album. And I also got Scary Monsters and Let's Dance and Black Star. Came across this one yesterday. I've heard it's not very good, but it was like $5, so I figure might as well grab that and add it to my Bowie collection. Let's see what here. Ooh, this is the Ramones, live in Glasgow. This was a Record Store Day release, a Black Friday Record Store Day release. Picked it up. You know, it's kind of spendy like a lot of Record Store Day releases are, but I'm a Ramones fan and thought it would be a good one to have. It's limited edition out of like 6,000 or something, 4,000, but I have a number 287, so kind of a low number. It's a double album. A lot of great early Ramones songs. Playing them live back then in 1977. This is Simply Saucer, Cyborgs Revisited. This is a Canadian band from the early to mid-70s, and they're kind of a great lost band of that era. If you're into like proto-punk type stuff, or into maybe harder psychedelic music, or Velvet Underground type stuff, I highly recommend this album. I've been wanting this for a long time. It was a little more expensive than I wanted to pay for it, and they just re-released it, I guess, last year, maybe even this year, from In the Red Records. Never heard of them before, but they put this out. 2-disc collection. I believe the first disc is the original album. Second disc is maybe outtakes or alternate takes or something like that, but this album sounds great on vinyl.
What a fantastic movie I'm in. What a fantastic scene I'm in. I get going past you now.
This is Jandek with The Living End. I'm a big Jandek fan, and he's the type of artist that you would either love or hate, but most likely hate. I'd say 90% of the population would just want to turn him off immediately, because it's kind of non-musical in a way. But as far as being evocative and atmospheric, and just kind of creepy and vibey and all that, it's probably the most interesting music I've heard in as far as those kind of things go. I got a few of his stuff on vinyl, a few of his records on vinyl, and they're pretty expensive, especially the originals. Jandek had his own record label called Corewood Industries, that you could just order directly from him, and I think he might still have that, but that was the only way to really get his stuff. I guess maybe record stores would sell him too, but pretty enigmatic guy. He finally started playing live in the early 2000s, but before then, no one really knew who he was, other than what they saw on the record jackets and heard in the music.
Stabbed a tumor in her heart. Been away that livelong night.
Frank Sinatra, September of My Years. I got this for $2. I don't have any Frank Sinatra albums. Not a huge fan, but I just haven't listened to him that much. But maybe I will give that a spin. Figure I should have some Frank Sinatra in my collection.
Has always had the wandering ways. Now I'm reaching back for yesterday.
This is Ween, the Pod. This is my favorite early Ween album. Definitely a strange one, but I find that the strangeness really kind of works the best on this album, and feels more cohesive and Has a definite kind of vibe to it, as creepy and unsettling as the vibe is. They claim to be inhaling Scotchgard when they made this album, which I don't know if that's true or not, but it does kind of sound like they might have been. I used to have this album from a different pressing, and the price on it skyrocketed to like $80 to $100. So I took it to a record convention and sold it to these really big Ween fans who had every other album on vinyl except for The Pod. Sold that, but then they just re-released it on this special gray vinyl edition, marbleized gray vinyl edition. So I'm like, all right, I sold it for $60. I'll pay $35 for the re-release and all that good stuff. So now I got The Pod back.
Sang into a glistening region, I sneezed and it blew my mind.
Alright, this is interesting, and this may have been a waste of money because it's not like stand-up comedy needs, like, you know, any certain type of sound quality necessarily. But just for the novelty factor, I decided to buy this album, Mitch Hedberg, Strategic Grill Locations, one of my favorite stand-up comedy albums of all time. And they had it at a local record store, and I've been kind of eyeing it for a while. But then my logical side was like, oh, you do really need a stand-up comedy album on vinyl. But then one day I just had some extra money, so I'm like, all right, I'm going to buy it. And I've actually listened to it quite a bit. It's kind of fun listening to comedy albums on vinyl. It's got a bass player throughout the whole thing, so that maybe that adds to the sound too. I don't know. Let's see what we can pull out here. Oh, this is fantastic. This is Hound Dog Taylor and House Rockers. Beware of the Dog. If you like gritty blues rock, this is a must hear. This is incredible. This has some of my favorite blues tracks on it. The Sun is Shining is my favorite. I just absolutely love that track.
The sun is shining. Oh, no, it's raining in my heart. The sun is shining. Oh, no, it's raining in my heart.
All right, this is Brian Eno, Ambient 4 on Land. I kind of wanted this album for a while. I got a bunch of Brian Eno stuff, and it's kind of expensive though. A lot of the original Brian Eno stuff is pretty expensive. And I went into a record store here locally last week, and they had this, and also Music for Airports. Repressed, actually. It was still in the shrink wrap, so it was a new album, and apparently it's like a European repress, somewhere in Europe, in Netherlands it looks like. And they had them here at their local record store, and I decided to get Ambient 4 on Land rather than Ambient 1 Music for Airports, just because I think I'd listen to this one more. I mean, I do like Music for Airports quite a bit. It's definitely a classic of the genre, but this one's a bit more my style. So yeah, if you like ambient music, definitely recommend this one. This is another great album that I've been wanting for a while. The Flying Burrito Brothers, The Gilded Palace of Sin. I was going to buy this online, but I found it at a local record store, and I'm like, I gotta have it, I need it, I want it, gotta buy it. Graham Parsons Band. I have Graham Parsons' 2 solo albums already on vinyl, and I got the Byrds' Sweethearts of the Rodeo, which he was on as well. But this is just a great album, up there with those, maybe even better. If you're into country at all, you gotta get that. right, Captain Beefheart and his magic band, Shiny Beast Bat Chain Puller. I have a lot of other Captain Beefheart albums, not all of them, but quite a bit, and found this original pressing of Shiny Beast Bat Chain Puller at a record store, and just had to have it. It was in really good shape, and yeah, it's a good one to have if you're into the Captain. This is the Byrds Greatest Hits. I got it for $2. $2, 3 for $5. I think so less than $2, I guess. But figured this is worth it. It's got a lot of Dylan covers on it. Tambourine Man, Turn, 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 All I Really Want to Do, Chimes of Freedom, 8 Miles High. All right, next we have Jim Sullivan, UFO. This is an album I just kind of learned about this year, and has a really interesting kind of odd backstory. Not the album itself, but this artist, Jim Sullivan. He disappeared sometime in the early to mid 70s, just kind of like disappeared without a trace after traveling across country from Hollywood to, I believe, Nashville, trying to like, you know, start a new music career there. But he disappeared without a trace, and since the album's called UFO, people think maybe he was, you know, maybe abducted by a UFO or something like that. But really interesting album. It has an early 70s kind of folk rock vibe, but it's got a little bit of a kind of mystical feel too, and the songs are all really good. So another great lost album from that era. Recommend Jim Sullivan's UFO. This is a Light in the Attic Records repress.
Where is Aunt Jerome? Where is there I wanna go? Where is Aunt Jerome? Is it a place out there? Just a town down there, if you're driving slow.
Alright, another Record Store Day release. Frank Zappa, We're Only In It For The Money. Got this at Record Store Day. I used to have this album, and I really like this cover. Like I didn't know if I was going to rebuy this album, but this cover is so cool. It's got the Sgt. Pepper parody kind of thing. And at first I was kind of disappointed when I opened it because it's actually a picture disc. And I generally don't like picture discs as far as listening goes. I mean, I've got a few decorated on my walls, but they've always sounded terrible when I've tried to listen to them before. But this picture disc actually sounds really good, so I guess not all picture discs sound terrible.
Whizzing and hasting and hooting through the day, Ronnie helping Kenny helping burn his boots away, and all the while on a shelf in the shed, Kenny's little creatures on display.
Alright, this is Lou Reed, New Sensations. I got quite a few Lou Reed albums. Definitely a fan of his stuff. And I'd never heard that one, but I heard that was one of his best albums of the 80s. Found it at a local record store for $6 or $7, and I gave it a purchase. And I enjoy it quite a bit. I Love You, Suzanne is a really nice, catchy, fun track. Some other good stuff on here. Since I showed that Lou Reed album, let's grab Transformer, maybe my favorite Lou Reed album. I had this album on a newer pressing, but the seams were split, or the spine was split, and the record was kind of coming through, and it kind of bugged me a little bit, so I sold it at a record convention. And was like, you know, sometimes it's kind of fun to sell your favorite albums and then figure like, oh, maybe I'll buy that back again someday. It's like getting to repurchase, you know, one of your favorites. And I found this at a local record store.
Satellites gone way up to Mars. Soon it'll be filled with parking cars. I watched it for a little while.
This is Black Sabbath Sabotage. I've been into Black Sabbath quite a bit lately. And this is one of their Big Six albums. You know, there's that saying that there's nothing better than the first 6 Black Sabbath albums or whatever, however that saying goes. But that was only $5. It's kind of beat up, but actually plays pretty decent. But I figured for $5 you might gotta get one of those classic Sabbath albums if it's only $5. So I picked that up. This is Bob Dylan's Under the Red Sky. Not the greatest album in the world, but Bob Dylan is my favorite artist. I have all of his other studio albums, and I just happened to find this at a record store, and I had to buy it. It was $30, which is more than I'd want to spend on that album normally, but since it was like the one album I needed to complete my Dylan studio album collection, I couldn't pass it up. I knew I probably wasn't going to be ordering it online for that. You know, it's like $35-40 online, so I was probably not going to do that anytime soon. It's not even in really that great a shape either, but I really had to complete my collection. Actually, I still don't have that new Triplicate album that he put out last year, so I guess I still need to get that. But if we don't count that, I now have the complete Dylan collection. Might do a video about that someday. This is Os Mutantes. I've wanted this for a while. This is a Russian pressing that I ordered on eBay, and it's just a great Brazilian psychedelic experimental kind of, I don't know exactly how to describe it. It's got a lot of different influences, but check out the Os Mutantes if you get a chance.
Pois ela é eu sou o menino dela.
Iggy and the Stooges, Raw Power. I sold my copy of this. My old copy was only the Bowie mix, and I kind of prefer the Iggy mix for a lot of the tracks. I prefer the Bowie mix on a couple tracks, but I'd say like 80% of the album I prefer the Iggy mix. And I got this, which has both mixes on it. So it's a two-disc collection, gatefold album, and it's got the Iggy mix and the Bowie mix on separate discs. So that was the one I really wanted. So I got that. See what else we got here. This is AC/DC Power Age. I got this kind of cheap at a local record store, and never been huge into AC/DC, but a friend of mine said that I should check out the early stuff, so I thought I'd pick this up. I really like the track Gone Shootin', and some other stuff. Give Me a Bullet, I like that one too, but have yet to give that whole album a listen. I will do that soon. We got The Doors' first album. I've actually never owned this album, which is surprising. I've always kind of wanted to buy it, but it's always been just a little more than I wanted to pay. Like, you know, sometimes it's like $20-30, or sometimes I just haven't had the money. But I found it for $10 at the record store. Said I'm going to finally own The Doors' first album. Alright, Love Forever Changes, another one I've always wanted to own, kind of, but just never came across it for the right price, and found this at a record store. Not an original pressing, but I think it's an early 70s pressing, and it's in good shape, so I'm glad I finally picked up Forever Changes by Love. Good pop psychedelic orchestral type stuff. I'm sure if you're watching this you probably heard of it or have heard it. Pat Benatar, $2 record I found in a 3 for $5 bin. Hit Me With Your Best Shot. I like that song. And then we got Paul Revere and the Raiders, another $2 record. I haven't listened to this album all the way, but I do like this track called Just Like Me. I think it was a radio hit. And for this band, which you think of as kind of a corny pop band, it has a bit of like a punk kind of energy to it on the chorus, in my opinion. Last thing I'm going to show here, Smiley Smile by the Beach Boys. I'd always kind of been curious about this album. I know it's critically panned and all that, and it's supposed to be like, oh, Good Vibrations is great, a couple other tracks are okay, but the rest is kind of not the best. And I don't know, I kind of like these weird albums, so I always wanted to hear it. Sometimes the albums that get panned for being too weird, I end up really liking. This one, however, I have to admit, it was a little bit, little underdeveloped, but you know, it's worth listening to. It's got some good tracks on it. Anyway, that's the records I bought in the last couple months or so. Also, have been buying a bunch of 45s. I didn't want to show those because I didn't want the video to be too long. But I hope you enjoyed this, and maybe I'll do more vinyl record videos in the future if anyone's interested, or if anyone has any requests about stuff they want me to do or show. That'd be cool. Thanks for watching this. Have a good day.